we face good times and not so good times, as we face the big issues and the small issues of life. Now, this week we're going to look at a story of three men who faced a very large issue in life in Daniel chapter 3. Three men who were faced with the issue of worshiping a false god or losing their life. And there was no middle ground. It was going to be a one or the other kind of situation. Now, you might be thinking, I've never had to face anything like that, and I hope I never will. But these three young men have faced many issues before this in their life. When we started this little mini-series a few weeks ago, we saw in chapter 1 of Daniel that they faced an issue of loyalty to God versus unclean foods, or whatever it is that those foods, the royal foods, represented, and certainly their commitment to God in Daniel 1. In Daniel 3, though, we're going to see them face another thing. You know, it reminds us so many times God gives us things along the way just to prepare us for the things that are going to happen further down the way, that are going to prepare us for things that are yet to come further down the way. And it certainly could be an observation in the life of three individuals here, plus Daniel and his three friends. Sometimes those small choices, those smaller situations, those smaller temptations, those issues, maybe we need to pass them before we're ready to go on to the other ones as well. We don't want to lose sight of the big picture that our loyalty belongs to God. Now we're going to go through these verses, and I think I'm just going to take them a chunk at a time out of Daniel chapter 3. We're going to start with what could be described as the image or the pagan image or the idol. And in Daniel 3 verse 1 it says, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before it. I'm going to pause there. We'll come back to verse 4 in just a minute. We'll talk a little bit about this pagan image and where it came from. Now, someone who understands all the different measurements and so forth, and whether you're looking at cubits or you're looking at a translation that converts that to feet for you, some said this is about the same height as the Statue of Liberty, not counting the base or pedestal it sits on, but about the size, roughly, or at least height, of the Statue of Liberty. So we're talking about a pretty substantial thing, 90-foot object, 9 feet wide. And it says it's made out of gold. Don't know if that would be solid gold or not, because if it were, that would be a lot of gold. Yeah. Or if it were some type of gold plate or a hollow object or just what, we're not told. Don't want to read too much into it. Now, you might be thinking, if you have been reading through the book of Daniel and you came to chapter 3 and all of a sudden he's setting up this image, what is it that possessed him? What is it that motivated him? What is it that inspired him to do such a thing, to commission a 10-story piece of artwork? That's part of it, perhaps, could be part of it. But in the previous chapter, we're told King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And it was a very troubling dream, and it upset him very greatly. And he needed to have someone to interpret what the dream meant. And so he called his own astrologers and other people that worked in his courtyard, in his royal court. And he said to them, basically, paraphrasing, just reviewing what we talked about last time, guys, I had this troubling dream. I want you to interpret it for me. And they said, okay, we can do that. What was your dream? He said, oh, no, wait a minute. You got to tell me what the dream was first. And they said, now, king, there's no one on earth that can do that. And he said, all right. They only fired them. A little more than that, he had them executed.
Yeah.
That's how they fired him, I guess, back in the day. I guess that, yeah. So, I wonder what he had to tell the shop steward. Anyway, that all took place, and then, of course, Daniel was summoned to come in, and God gave Daniel the interpretation of the dream. And in that dream, there was a very tall object shaped like a human being, and it was made up of 4 different kinds of metal. It had the gold, and then the silver, and the bronze, and then the iron legs, and so forth. The head was gold, chest was silver, and so forth. And so it seems like that may have been what inspired Nebuchadnezzar to build this object. Now, it does not say that this image was in the form of a human shape or form. It just says it was 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, but it's kind of puzzling. Why would he just all of a sudden turn around and do this if he weren't thinking about what he had seen in that dream? He's also taking a little more artistic license, because in the dream, only the head was made of gold. If this is a representation of what he saw in his dream, and it would make sense because it follows right on that context, he decided he was going to make it all gold. Maybe this was his way of trying to assert himself, saying, I'm going to be the ruler, because the statue and in the dream, the 4 different metals represented 4 different kingdoms that were going to come and then be overcome. And that we know how that took place. That Persia was going to overcome Babylon, and the Greeks were going to replace the Persians, and then the Romans were going to replace the Greeks, and so forth. And we saw that. Of course, there was a little part that Nebuchadnezzar just kind of conveniently forgot that there was a stone not carved by human hands that was going to come and crush and overcome and be the lasting kingdom. And of course, that's Jesus' kingdom. And we said that the last time. Again, I'm just reviewing that because it does seem to be here that he's going to go out and he's going to build this 90-foot high object, kind of like saying, okay, I'm going to, there's not going to be silver, it's not going to be brass or bronze, there's not going to be iron. So it's going to be my kingdom. I'm going to take this. I'm going to stand up for myself and fight for that. Well, let's see. What was I here? If this image had a face on it, and we're not told that it did, but who do you think? Whose face do you think he would have put on it? Been suggested. So, he has this commission. He says he made it. I mean, it's not like he went out and actually crafted it, made it. He ordered it to be made, I'm sure. Set up in this place, the Plain of Dura. We're not exactly sure where that was. There's a village known as Duran, something like that, near the Tigris River. Maybe that's where this was, had been. But it was in the province of Babylon. And then he summons all these people. And some of these names of officials may escape us. And especially the first one, the satraps. Satraps are mentioned here and in chapter 6. They're also mentioned in the book of Ezra and Esther, I believe. And they were the chief representatives of the king. And they basically had charge of provinces in the kingdom. So they might have been like commissioners or governors or something like that in our own nation and the way we would have things divided up here. But they were a major official, and they were key to his kingdom. They were also distributed out in the provinces, and they kept everybody in line in those provinces, and they were called the satraps. And other officials were the prefects. Those were military commanders. Their governors would be civil administrators. So a little different maybe than what we would consider to be a governor, but a civil administrator for sure. And an advisor. Those were counselors to the various ones in the government, and treasurers, of course, keeping track of all the money, and the judges, administrators of the law, and magistrates. Those are one who pass judgment and keeping the law. All these different things. So they had quite a well-defined government complex. And it was all designed to just kind of keep everybody in line and point everybody to Nebuchadnezzar. The other government officials or various subordinates and so forth. All these officials were invited, summoned. When the king invites, it's a little bit more than a casual invite. They were required to come, I believe, and to bow down to this object, as we will see. So all of these people, all these different officials that I've just described in verse 2 are named again in verse 3. And they have come and they have stood before it. But this was, as we will see, not a state function. It was a religious event. Okay, they're coming to bow down and offer a sense of allegiance that is more than just saying, okay, you're the leader of our country and we'll respect and follow you. It was far more than that. It was they are going to be called upon to worship him. So picking up again in verse 4. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language." So whether other nations were invited or just because they had conquered so many different groups, they're representatives of different nationalities within Babylon at this time. He says, this is what you're commanded to do. Doesn't matter what your background is or what your thoughts or feelings are about it. Here's your command. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward. Remember, they were the ones who Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2 had called upon initially to interpret dreams. So that there was a larger class of this people, the ones that he had specifically called on and been executed. But there were more. Maybe they were even related. We don't know. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever." Now, I think they were kind of kissing up a little bit. Yeah. "You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand. Pause there, come back to verse 16 just a minute. It had been a hard time for this group of people known as astrologers, and who all they were and how many of them there were and all this kind of thing. But again, in chapter 2, some of their number couldn't describe Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and so their ranks have been thinned out. Now they're looking around, and they have seen that a lot of the positions of authority that they desire or possibly once held have been taken by captive or captured slaves, Jewish people, Judeans, and now they have been promoted over them. Because you remember in chapter 1, it says that Daniel and his friends, specifically these three, and perhaps others that just aren't mentioned, they were given wisdom from God, they were given ability, and God just gave them favor, and they were blessed in the various positions where they served, and they ruled over the authorities. And so, you know how it is in the workplace. Someone gets promoted a little bit ahead of time, or gets that job that somebody else wanted. And you know how that works with the little whispers over here and the gossips over there. And well, I just got that job because of this, that, or the others, and only just kind of magnify that a little bit more to now they're going to try and not get them fired, get them killed. And so you've got a good murder plot going here. It was a scandalous thing to them. Why should non-Babylonians be ruling over Babylon or have these positions of extreme authority? Not more than Nebuchadnezzar, but certainly very high up in his royal court. Now they missed, or at least Nebuchadnezzar did, miss the idea that God is in charge. And he seems to be challenged here quite a bit. And he rewrites his dream to where now this object's going to be set up and everybody's going to come and bow down to him. Maybe he just thought that since he was the golden head, that meant that this is the way he took it, that everybody ought to come and worship him. Now, but he forgot about some things. Maybe there was a lot more time elapsed between chapter 2 and chapter 3, or the events that are recorded in them. Or maybe he just, pride got the better part of him. But the real issue comes down to what he says in verse 15. The real issue is this: loyalty to the state or God's ability to deliver. Is God able to save from Nebuchadnezzar's evil plans? Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand. He isn't just setting himself up as ruler of a country or a region or maybe even the world. He's setting himself up as God. Yeah. Now, there might be a God who can interpret his dream or tell him what that dream is. But, your God ain't going to be able to come rescue you from my hand. That's what he's saying. Back to verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into a blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace so hot, that the flames of fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. We'll pause there for just a moment. Come back to verse 24 here in just a second. Nebuchadnezzar, he did give them the benefit of the doubt. He didn't just listen to the astrologers. He's learned a little bit, not take their word for anything. So he has Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego brought in, and he questions them. Did you actually, in fact? And in case you did, I'm just going to give you a second chance, and we'll just play this music again, and you can bow down, worship him, and get off the hook. And they just said, Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If you throw us into the fire, God is able to deliver us. But even if not, we're not going to bow down to you. We are not going to serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. They confess that God is able. They do not say what God is going to do. A lot of time in our prayer life, we spend time telling God what he should do. God, I want you to do it this way. I want you to do it at this time. This is how I want you to do it, what I want you to do. And we start telling him how he should do all these things. Now, these three weren't going to say that. They were going to say God is going to deliver us. In that he'll deliver us from the burning fire. He'll rescue us. He'll take us out of your hand one way or another. Even if we die, we're still going to be with the Lord. So guess what? You do not have any control over us. You cannot conquer us, Nebuchadnezzar. But they weren't going to commit God to a specific plan of action. They just knew that he was able to deliver them no matter what. A lot of people would say, oh, but God, we're praying for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Oh, please spare them from that fire. God, in this case, he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. In fact, this is a fulfillment of Isaiah 43 that says, some through the water and some through the flood, and some through the fire. God's going to be with them, and he's going to go with them through this. But look at the outcome, and we'll see some of this in just a moment. The outcome was that he was with them, went through the fire with them, and brought them out on the other side. When they went in, they were bound by all kinds of things, tied tightly. When they come out, all those ropes or whatever it is that they tied them up with weren't there anymore. They'd been loose. Now their clothes did not burn up. They weren't even a little singed. More than that, they didn't even smell like smoke. That's a miracle. I have been around objects that have been in and or around a fire. You don't get that smell of smoke out for a long time, do you? And their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. They weren't harmed, not even their clothes. Not even smell like smoke. God is glorified. It confirmed their faith and their ministry. It confirmed what they were saying. And in the end, they will be promoted. So let's go ahead and continue reading, finish out the chapter. They've just been thrown into the furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement. And he asked his advisor, weren't there 3 men that were tied up, that we tied up and threw into the fire? And they replied, certainly, O king. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than to serve or worship any God except their own God." Pause there just for a moment. Think about how God is glorified in this. When the chapter started, Nebuchadnezzar set up a large object of gold, and he's summoned all these people to come and stand before it, and then they're commanded to bow down and worship. And in the end, what happens? All these people are standing around watching Nebuchadnezzar give praise to God. Very different. It ended very different than what Nebuchadnezzar had planned at the outset. And sometimes when we see things and we think, well, God, why don't you, do this, or why don't you do it that way, or why don't you, so forth. It may not be as significantly large an event like this, maybe something else. But you just never know, because when God works through it, when he leads his people by his will, and he goes with us every step of the way, God can accomplish so much more than we could ever dream. Certainly, I would imagine even Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were a little surprised by the outcome, exactly how it all came to be, and I imagine they're also very pleased. Their worst fears had materialized, but God's arm is never too short to save. We wish that God did not wait to intervene when disaster strikes. Oh my, where are you, God? Sometimes he seems quiet, sometimes he seems distant, but oh, he's right there. He'll even be right in the middle of the furnace with you. Never leave or forsake you. God demonstrates that he is with those who are faithful even in our harshest tests and trials and tribulations. He did not prevent them from being thrown into the fire, but he was with them. He did prevent them from being harmed by the fire, though. Nebuchadnezzar finishes out, "Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut to pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. They got a promotion in the end. But the main key there is in verse 29. And it goes along with what we said in verse 15. Remember the last part of verse 15, Nebuchadnezzar, while he's still all full of himself, said, when he was threatening the three, he said, "What God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" God showed him who it was, and he says, "No other God can save in this way." You can just shorten it out and just say, "No other God can save." Period. So in big and in small things, whatever comes our way, our loyalty to God is never misplaced. He will see you through. He will go through it with you. And nothing can ultimately harm us. In fact, God can cause all things to work to the good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose, that we might be conformed to the image of Christ Jesus our Savior. And with that, I ask if there are any prayer requests for tonight.